We start this morning with a developing story out of London. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has asked the Queen to suspend Parliament ahead of the Brexit deadline. Joining us to help explain what exactly this means for the UK is CBS News correspondent Ian Lee. Ian, why is the Prime Minister making this request?
Boris Johnson used his nuclear option, Chris, when he announced plans to suspend Parliament to try to force through a no-deal Brexit. He had promised to take the United Kingdom out of the EU by the end of October with or without a deal, do or die, as he put it. Now his latest power play will have the Queen suspend Parliament in early September until October 14th. Simply put, parliamentarians won't have enough time to pass any new laws to block a no-deal Brexit when they reconvene. This is extremely controversial, and it has even members of Johnson's own party up in arms. One member warned this could bring down the government. The opposition has gone further, branding Johnson a tin-pot dictator and saying he is a real threat to democracy. Now, Boris Johnson told reporters this morning his move isn't about strong-arming Brexit, but rather advancing his domestic agenda. He also brushed aside accusations of acting like a dictator by asserting he is fulfilling the people's vote to leave the EU. But the Prime Minister can't claim victory quite yet. His request could face legal challenges, and there's also a chance of a vote of no confidence that could bring down his government that's already hanging by a thread with just a simple majority of one. Then there's the Queen. While she technically has power to say no to the Prime Minister, it's extremely unlikely. The monarchy has always tried to stay above politics, but make no mistake, the gauntlet has been thrown down in Britain and for the EU as they'll face more pressure to come up with a new deal. Chris?
Now, Ian, earlier the Prime Minister said the UK needs a new legislative program. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We need to deal with the cost of living, moving to a high-wage, high-productivity economy, which is, I think, what this country needs to be. And to do that, we need new legislation. We've got to be bringing forward new and important bills, and that's why we are going to have a Queen's speech, and we're going to do it on October the 14th. And we've got to move ahead now with a new legislative programme.
It's interesting, he's talking about moving ahead with a new legislative program while also talking about trying to essentially shut down Parliament.
Yeah, he's kind of putting the cart before the horse, if you will. You know, he's talking about what the government should be doing moving forward, but really Brexit is looming large. You know, without a decision on what's going to happen with Brexit, a lot could happen when it comes to his domestic agenda. There are people who are saying that there could be food, medicine shortages, all sorts of disruptions if a no-deal Brexit happens, which would change his domestic agenda quite drastically. So really, coming down to that end of October deadline, you know, will they be able to strike a new deal? Now the EU has been fairly firm on the fact that they say they don't want to negotiate a new deal, a different one than they did with the former Prime Minister Theresa May. Boris Johnson has been adamant that he wants to see a new deal, but he also said, again, do or die. If they don't come up with one, he's not afraid of taking the UK out of the EU with no deal at all, a hard Brexit.
So what's the likelihood that he's able to maneuver to keep Parliament closed? The reaction has been pretty strong this morning.
The reaction has come in fast and furious. You know, we have even said members of his own party are questioning this decision. You have members of the opposition who are really using some strong words. I'll read you some of them. They say that, you know, this is just him trying to, as an affront to the democracy. You know, we mentioned a tin-pot dictator. They say it's deeply dangerous. You also have the Conservative Party chairman, though, supporting the Prime Minister, saying that this is just business as usual, that typically Parliament does take a recess before the Queen's speech, and he says, what else is new? But this is quite controversial, and there are a couple routes that Parliament can take. You know, the Queen is unlikely to deny this request, and that's because Parliament can still have a vote of no confidence, which would basically bring down his government. The ball is really in their court if they want to do the nuclear option. We already mentioned Boris Johnson used the nuclear option. Parliament also has their own nuclear option if enough of them feel that this isn't the way that the country should be moving forward.
And the clock is ticking down on Brexit. Ian Lee, thank you very much.